There are some things that you just can't know about your spouse until after you've been married to them for a while. He leaves the seat up, she squeezes the tube from the middle. He snores, she talks in her sleep. These things are annoying but not terribly serious. But what about when what you find out about your spouse and the mother or father of your children is something serious? What about when you find out that they're gay? That's what we're going to be talking about today on Fathers Are Parents Too. We're here today with authors Dr. Amity Buxton and Dr. Fernando Gutierrez. Dr. Buxton is the author of the book The Other Side of the Closet, and Dr. Gutierrez has written several publications and collaborated on a book that deals with counseling gay and lesbian people. Dr. Buxton, The Other Side of the Closet, what does that mean? What does that refer to?
It refers to the straight spouse who finds himself or herself in the closet that the wife or the husband just left. In other words, when the husband comes out and says, "I'm gay," they're free, they're liberated from a closet into which they had put themselves. The straight spouse feels stigmatized by the very same social attitudes and goes in and feels isolated. So that's what that's about. The reason I wrote the book was, since Fathers Are Parents Too, the gay fathers of San Francisco were very concerned because many of their wives were not letting them see their children because they were gay. So they asked me to write the book so that they could their wives could understand better what was going on, they could communicate better, and maybe they'd see their children again.
Because being gay isn't necessarily at all a parenting issue.
Not at all.
And now what about the children of these marriages or relationships? Then they too, I would presume, end up in this closet, as it were.
They're in that closet too, and of course as they go into those peer teenage years and they don't want to be different from anybody else, this is one more thing by which they're different, and they're hurt by anti-gay comments in the classroom. So my research and my studies since 1986 has been on the impact on the family of these coming out crises.
Okay, and then Dr. Gutierrez, you've actually done research and authored on the other side of the closet, as it were, and you've worked with or written about these parents who are coming out and are gay and how that impacts them.
And it's not as easy as, well, I came out and then I'm okay. All of a sudden I have to come out, and the coming out process is a very slow process where I have to accept myself and develop a new identity, and it's hard for a gay father or a gay parent to do that, because they have to do that in the context of also being part of the supposedly heterosexual world, which is they're part of a family, and they now have to develop their identity while at the same time deal with the heterosexual context that they find themselves in, with having children, having to go to the teachers' meetings and that sort of thing, while they're developing this new identity, which can be very uncomfortable.
Now, I want to talk specifically about two things that I think is just so neat to have the two of you here together to address. One of them is, of course, what this is all about is children, and obviously children are very impacted both by what the straight parent must be going through, as well as by the coming out of their other parent and what they are going through as well. So I'd like to hear you both talk a bit about that from, as much as you can, the children's perspective, but also what each parent then can do to facilitate not only their own, I don't know if recovery is the right word, but their own transition, but also to be sensitive to, A, the other parent, who is obviously going through their own host of things, and B, the child. So, Dr. Buxton, maybe if you can talk about...
I'd like to put it in a large context. Okay. What it is 3 waves of coming out. Fernando just mentioned the slow process of coming to terms with your own homosexuality or bisexuality. Then the word comes out to the straight spouse, and he or she has to go through another coming out process, which is light years behind the husband's. And then they tell the children, and the children have to go through their own coming out process, and at the same time deal with growing up. So we have these 4 layers of processes going on in the family at the same time.
Now you say the straight spouse is way behind the gay spouse. Is that because the gay spouse has been dealing all along
Yes.
with this?
And the gay spouse knows
Yeah.
what they're going through, but
Yeah.
the gay spouse does, the heterosexual spouse doesn't know that. Doesn't know that the process that the spouse is going through.
How much, there seems to be that there would be a great deal of questioning, not only on the part of the straight spouse, how could I not know? And, you know, is there something wrong with me, which is, of course, a whole nother show. But even their family, the people that should be their support system, and for the children, how could you not know you had a defective marriage or...
There's a grieving process that's going on, each person in that family is going through a grieving process. The heterosexual spouse is going through the grieving of losing the gay spouse. The gay spouse is going through a grieving process of losing their heterosexuality. The children are going through the grieving process of losing the family, the sense of family, or the parent, the gay parent, the parent that they knew that now all of a sudden is saying that they're gay. And so, and because everybody's going through this grieving process, they're going through an insecurity, yet they're looking for the support from the other members of the family. And part of the grieving process is an anger stage, where I'm angry that you have changed my reality. And so I'm angry with you, you're expecting me, you're expecting to support me, you know.
And there's no support there.
There's no support there, you know.
Well, speaking of support, another interesting phenomenon is since Stonewall, there is more and more support for the gay and lesbian person outside the family.
Mm-hmm.
For the straight spouse, there is virtually none, because they don't understand the unique issues. They say, oh, just another divorce, and isn't it too bad, and poor you, and irrelevant kind of comments.
And
So that's part of the closet, too. They're isolated from any support.
And I would also imagine, now we have had on this show before guests who have talked about the sort of societal expectations that one has, say, on a wife as she's going through the divorce process, and her family and her friends will be telling you, oh, he's a jerk, and you know, you should take him for everything he's got, where the wife may actually be trying to find a way to get beyond that and still have a relationship with this person who they share a parent with. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that that's got to be even much harder on the spouse of someone who comes out, because what they're getting then is also, you know, all the homophobia on top of that. How can you let your children around that pervert, or how can you let her have the children around her girlfriend? So I would imagine the pressure on the straight spouse to really exact a vengeance on the other spouse has got to be just incredible. And then on the other side, this gay spouse who's already worried about isolation from their children has to deal with that as well. Back to my original question about the kids then, what would you, Fernando, and you, Amity, counsel to the respective spouses to allow them to stay centered and to not destroy the relationship between the child and the gay spouse, or for that matter, the straight spouse? How would you counsel if you had in your practice a gay father come to you and say, I've just come out, and now how do I convince my child that I'm still his father, that has not changed, I'm the same person that he's known?
Part of what I would say to the gay parent is to step back a little bit and not get defensive, and let the child have their anger, and support that child, and to let that child know how you're feeling, that you're still the same parent that child had before. The thing that changes, and I think Anne talked about it, I think everybody now is exposed to the homophobia around this parent coming out. And so there has to be a lot of support of each other. And the gay parent can often find support because the gay network is already very well established, whereas the heterosexual parent may not know where to look for that support. And the children, of course, have even less support, so they're going to be left out in the cold trying to deal with all these feelings themselves. So both parents have to sit down with their children and talk these things through, and to express the anger, to try to reduce the blaming that can go on in expressing that anger, and express genuine anger but also love at the same time.
Sort of a safe atmosphere in which to express that anger. Yes. Amity, I come to you and I say that no good SOB after all these years, and I've given him the best years of my life, and we have 2 wonderful children, and now I find out that he's got a boyfriend and that's it, and I don't want my kids exposed to that, and they've heard enough. What do you say to me? Take
it slowly and easily. One of the things that happens is that when the gay parent comes out of the closet, it's such a relief and euphoria, and many turn out to be like teenagers in a candy shop, and they've never had a chance to do all the flirting games with their own sex, the people they're really attracted to. So they're going off crazily, and the straight spouse is in shock. So the advice I give to the people that call me every day is just give it a year or 2 till your shock melts and the other person simmers down. Then you can make long-term decisions. I try to make them see what the other gay person has gone through. We have a support network for straight spouses now in the United States, and one for children too. So put them in touch with other spouses. Realize they're not alone. It's the being alone and feeling that they've been rejected as a woman, and they don't have any, they're pretty stupid themselves, they blame themselves a lot, that feeds into the anger.
You know, one thing, when you're coming out, or when you're experiencing your parents coming out, the expectation sometimes is get them hooked up to a network, and sometimes that may not work, because when a person's coming out, first they have to come out to themselves, then they have to come out to somebody like yourself, in other words, another gay person, and then they might be ready to come out to somebody different than them, and the children might be going through the same process, and the heterosexual spouse might be going through the same process. So you say, oh, I know this group, and yet it may take them a while before they connect with that group.
But at least they know there's a group.
Yes, and it's in the background, so that when they're ready, they know that there's a group there, and then now they're ready to connect. But not to expect that you tell somebody about a group and that they're suddenly going to join that group, because they're going to be rejecting us. I don't want to tell people what I'm going through.
They're not ready. They're not ready.
And so they may not be ready to do that.
We're going to go take some questions from the audience in a minute, but very quickly, before the show started, Fernando, you mentioned to me, in the context of gay fathers who actually end up with custody or still a very involved relationship with their children, that studies have shown that, in fact, some gay fathers, once they come out, are more exemplary fathers than our straight fathers in that situation, and I was astonished to hear that. You're shaking your head too, so you know about this. Well, what is that about?
Well, because a lot of gay men especially are accused of being child molesters, or not really being fit parents, and we just had a case in Virginia of a lesbian mother who lost the custody of her child because she was deemed an unfit parent, and that's the stereotype, and that's not necessarily the case. There are just as many unfit heterosexual parents as there are unfit gay or lesbian parents, and so gays and lesbians know that, so that when they're in the middle of a custody battle, they pay more attention to that child and make sure that the child's needs are met, so that to prevent those accusations.
Because they're under a microscope, basically.
Yes, they're under a microscope.
The other thing is that many times the gay or lesbian parent does have a partner and establishes a stable home, which is much more secure for the children than the straight parent who's going nuts.
Who's in crisis.
And so many times the children will gravitate, even as they get older, to the stable home.
Because of the stability.
And that's the gay parents.
Okay, well, we're going to go over now to our audience, and I know there's some questions waiting for you. So, I'm here now with the Fathers Are Parents 2 studio audience, and they have some questions for Dr. Buxton and Gutierrez. Yes.
Yes, you partially addressed this question about false allegations of sexual abuse by the gay parent brought by the straight parent. And it seems to me that perhaps in San Francisco might be a different situation than the rest of the country. but I wonder, do the professionals associated with family court, are they sensitive to the fact that there's probably a greater probability of false allegations happening in this circumstances, and do they then jump at the chance of prosecuting the gay person in either San Francisco or other parts of the country?
No, because I think that the professionals in family court hold the same stereotypes, often the same homophobia that you see out in society. And for example, in San Francisco, gay parents can adopt children, but most of the time they will allow, for example, two men to adopt a female child, or often they will allow them to adopt a developmentally disabled child because they're perceived as not quite as attractive, or potentially that the gay man is going to be attracted to that child. In Santa Clara County, for example, they're not allowed to adopt, period, whether it's female or developmentally disabled, although the county says that's not true, that's not their policy. But in reality, very few gay parents get to adopt in Santa Clara County. It is easier in San Francisco County, but it's opposite sex usually.
I would agree. I think the stereotypes of gay lifestyle and gay this and gay that color all of the divorce and custody evaluations that are made. And one of my tasks when I talk is to separate out the things that are stereotypes in gays and look at parenting per se. But I do think, I agree, that in general, the judges have picked up what society as a whole, the myths.
I'd like to ask that, I find it very amazing and certainly refreshing that the book you've written, Dr. Buxton, is about the straight spouse and what they're dealing with as the gay spouse comes out, and yet clearly you're very sensitive and sympathetic also to the experience of the gay spouse as they're coming out. And my sense in reviewing your book also, as well as speaking with you, is that you have found these straight spouses do come to a place where they too are able to accept and are much more comfortable with it maybe than even the world around them. And I'm wondering if you can comment on that a bit.
Most of them do, and one of the reasons I'm so concerned that they do and help them is not only for their own peace of mind and having the divorce go more securely, but the straight spouse becomes the model for the children. And if the straight mom or dad can accept the gay mom or dad, then the children will more likely feel more comfortable with the situation. There are some, like the one story in my book, where the mother is so anti-gay and feels that it's the work of the devil, and she doesn't let her children see their father as he's dying of AIDS, because growing up with certain values, she can't switch. But I'd say the vast majority do eventually come to terms and realize this is who the person is.
And when you're thrust into the situation of having to deal with the situation that all of a sudden you have a gay spouse or a gay parent, you have to adapt. You either adapt or you check out of the situation, and that's what society wants to do. Society says, we don't want to deal with the fact that there are gay parents out there. We just want it to go away, and so they don't deal with it, and then they attempt to keep people in the closet and to make people live heterosexual lives when in fact they may be gay or lesbian, while the gay family has to deal with the fact that there's a heterosexual parent, that there's a gay parent, and there are children who may or may not turn out to be gay.
Right.
It just would seem to me that to lose a heterosexual parent, what you thought was a heterosexual parent, to the reality of them actually being homosexual is certainly not nearly as devastating as losing that parent altogether, and it just seems to make sense.
Exactly, because it's still your parent with the same feelings, with the same love, except now you have to incorporate this new information into your life and adapt to it, but also in the context of a very oppressive society that says this shouldn't be, and we're going to judge what's going on in your family, and that's very hard for a child or an adolescent who may be dealing with their own sexuality to have to face with all of the pressure that society puts on them.
And this very fact that it's still the same parent is very hurtful to the straight spouse because it is not the same spouse anymore. So by hurting as a spouse and being concerned about the children, you have to eventually, I counsel them to be sure the bond with the gay parent is still there. Protect, be a good co-parent, but be able to give up
Yeah, for the
the spouse.
For the heterosexual parent, now I've lost the spouse, and now I have to just accept that he or she is my friend, you know, and that's very difficult to accept.
Did you have a question? Excuse me.
I think it's difficult for all of us after divorce to develop a really successful co-parenting relationship with this person that we've had such intense feelings for, that we once were so madly in love with and now can't sometimes stand to be in the same room with.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it must be even more difficult for people whose ex-spouse has come out of the closet. And in fact, I have a friend who's in this situation whose wife is, when she left him, moved in with a lesbian lover, and he seems to be having an incredibly difficult time in coming to that plateau where he can deal with her as a cooperative co-parent. Is there any particular advice that I could give him to help him?
Well, one thing is it takes a long time. It may take 3 to 6 years eventually to come to that place, and to just go slowly and keep thinking it's the same mother. Focus on her being the same mother of the children.
You know, with a gay and heterosexual couple, or it's the same as with heterosexual couples. You know, you're going to be angry with each other, and often you can use the children as the weapons, you know, to get back at each other. Well, in a gay and heterosexual couple relationship where there's one of each, you know, the heterosexual parent has the ammunition against the gay parent. Oh, society hates you, so I now have the ammunition to use against you, and that can be very hurtful to everybody involved because everybody loses at that point. So I think it's very important, whether you're heterosexual or gay, is to not to deal with your anger, and if you can't deal with your anger, then you need to seek counseling to work through that anger yourself, and not use that anger as a weapon against your partner, whether you're gay or heterosexual.
And you also, since we're in the same area, I can put him in touch with other men, and if he can talk to other men and see how they came through. You need a model to get through this, because you don't learn this in school, and how to deal with your husband.
And in the closet, if you force gay and lesbian people, or people who are in a relationship with a gay or lesbian, it's hard to do because there are no mentors out there to show you how to do it. So you're on your own, and you're in a sense reinventing the wheel each time this process happens.
How is the impact different on both the straight spouse and the children when the coming out occurs within the context of the still intact marriage, which may then, or may not, I assume, precipitate the divorce, versus after there's already been a separation? Is there ever an optimal time to make this announcement, or a way to handle this timing-wise?
Well, there are two. On the one hand, it's better if they come out after the divorce, because then the gay thing doesn't get mixed up with that as much. On the other hand, and that is if the gay person only then discovered really and truly that's who he or she was. On the other hand, if there's a divorce and it's hidden, the straight spouse will be even more angry at the deception. So there's the deception issue, that he or she's been in the closet all this time and I never knew it, and I'm pretty stupid, and why did he hide it, and why didn't he trust me? And then there's the breakup of the family when they do come out. Each case is very different.
You know, the holidays are coming up, and often holidays are
Yes.
times when people come together as a family, and that's often when people decide, well, I'm especially if it's the children coming out to the parents, or, you know, that I'm gonna come out to the family because we're together.
Merry Christmas, here's your present.
That may not be necessarily the best time, because holidays are stressful for people anyway, because families are coming together, and that can cause stress, and that may not be the best time. I would suggest that for example, often it's found out because especially the male may have gotten caught having a sexual relationship in public or something like that, so the spouse finds out about it through a legal action, and so that's a very negative way of finding out. So the best way would be to either seek out a counselor that you can practice coming out to your spouse, you know, and maybe sitting down with your spouse and say there's something important that I need to tell you, and prepare the spouse to be in a good place to hear what's going to be said, and not just spring it on your spouse, because it's shocking the spouse at that point. Or you may want to talk to a counselor and say, I would like to bring my spouse in, and tell the spouse within the counseling context. I think those would be better ways of doing it.
What are the biggest issues for these children, or fears? What do the children of these parents need to hear from each parent to allow them to transition to a new, perhaps, but still bonded relationship with the
main
gay
thing
parent?
is we both love you, and we're both here for you. And you'll have a home in both places. Your lives won't change. That's the main thing they have to hear. When they go to school and they start hearing anti-gay jokes and those kinds of things, they need a lot of education, knowledge as they grow up and deal with it.
Children fear abandonment, you know, and that they're going to be abandoned by either or both parents. And when the court system gets involved, all of a sudden it's, who am I going to go with? And somebody else is going to make this decision. And, you know, I may want to go with my gay parent, you know, but the court is going to say that parent is unfit. You have to go with the other parent. And so children are feeling a loss of control. They might say, well, if I had been a better son or daughter, maybe I might have been able to help the situation. So they blame themselves. So they need support from both parents.
And to make it clear, it's not because daddy's gay or mom is lesbian.
Right.
That really is the secondary issue, and they need to know that.
I'd like to just throw in something here which ties
Really
into
quickly.
something Fernando said before, and that is people like to sweep this whole issue under the rug. I don't think people realize there are at least, and it's a conservative estimate, 2 million couples, of which one of them is gay or lesbian.
Wow,
They
that's
may
quite
not
a
know
bit.
it yet, but there are about 2 million.
And they're going to find out.
And it may not end in divorce.
That's right. The majority will, but about 15%
Doesn't
will
have
stay
to.
together.
That's great. The book is The Other Side of the Closet. Thank you very much, Dr. Buxton, Dr. Gutierrez, for being here. Thank you all for being here, and join us next week on Fathers Are Parents Too.